Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of UFOs and Other Paranormal Stuff. I hope you are doing okay and this dreaded coronavirus is staying away from your door. I hope you enjoyed the last episode. It was my first ever and I think it showed a little bit. I realised, listening back to it, that I didn't introduce myself to you, my valued listeners. I am Andy. I've lived in Croydon my whole life. I have worked in Croydon most of my life. I've had a few jobs, but the highlights have been working in the NHS, for the government, and of course, for the railway. The latter I enjoyed immensely and have made many lifelong friends while working in that industry. I got married a couple of years ago, and despite the usual bumps that life seems to throw at everybody, life is pretty good for us. Hobbies of mine are writing, going hiking. I did the West Highland Way last year, creating lockdown pub quizzes, and in my time I've managed to win a World Cup, a European Championship, and many other domestic titles as managers of football teams on football management games. Maybe I should go into football management for real. My new hobby is podcasting, and I thought I would link that up with one of my interests, the paranormal. I'd always been into books and movies, TV shows about UFOs, ghosts, poltergeists, etc., but always thought that kind of thing was really not real. That was until the incident in 1999, which I mentioned in my first episode. Anyway, today's subject is about the ghosts around New Addington. That will include ghostly things that have happened to me physically a few years ago now. Bit creepy they were. Those of you that don't know about New Addington, it is a village just to the south of Croydon and a few miles southwest of Bromley in South London. It has easy tram access to Croydon and Wimbledon, as well as a good bus connection to Bromley, Hayes, Biggin Hill and Selsdon. Mostly farmland and woodland until the 1930s, New Addington was to be created as a garden village with its own amenities. However, World War II meant that building had to be suspended. Some of those who served at the nearby Biggin Hill Airport were given accommodation in some of the completed buildings in New Addington. Addo is also nicknamed Little Siberia, as it is usually a degree or 3 colder than Croydon. It is said that it also had links to royalty, King Henry's Drive and Queen Elizabeth's Drive being in the village. King Henry VIII apparently hunted nearby. When I put the teaser for this episode out on the Facebook group, I had many people tell me of their weird sightings whilst in or around New Addington. Anthony mentioned hearing a horseman riding in the middle of the night, but when looking to see, he would see nothing there. That made me remember an incident that I had back in, I think, the year 2000, but I'll tell you a bit about that later. Fred says about hearing a child screaming. The story goes that she was caught in a house fire on Burford Way. Poor thing. One sighting I have heard a lot of, and has been in the newspapers around here, is about a German World War II pilot that walks around parts of New Addington. The story goes that during the war, when fighting was at its height, remembering that the hugely important Biggin Hill Airport and Croydon and Kenley aerodromes are nearby, the German fighter plane was shot down as it battled the RAF in the skies above Croydon. The pilot is said to have ejected from the plane and he came down in New Addington. Badly injured, he was greeted by local people who were understandably a little bit hostile. However, humanity prevailed and the pilot was protected and taken to hospital. His injuries were so severe that he died soon after arriving. In the years after his passing, people have reported seeing him, especially in Queen Elizabeth's Drive. One story states that a man was looking for his wallet in Queen Elizabeth's Drive when it was handed to him by the ghost of the pilot. The man wore a damaged flying jacket and had a foreign accent too. He disappeared right after handing the wallet back. Theories are that the pilot was grateful for the protection he received after crashing down in New Addington and before going to hospital and wanted to say thank you. Thanks Donna, Andy and Lee for telling me of that ghost. There were quite a few people who told me that they had seen a ghost of a monk, mostly on the outskirts of New Addington. Patricia and Kay tell me they saw a monk walking near to the White Bear. The White Bear is now a pub stroke restaurant, but the building dates back over 500 years, and in my opinion, it is well worth a visit. Patricia goes on to say that whilst out driving, she saw the monk. Her daughter pulled over to allow another car to pass by. As that car passed between them and the monk disappeared. No gaps in hedges, nowhere for it to go. It just seemingly vanished into thin air. Janet mentions that she used to see a monk sitting atop the stairs at her house. I wonder if the two are the same. Research on this has not come up with much. There is, however, a possible link to a rectory that was built in Bermondsey, 15 miles to the north of New Addington, after the destruction of a nearby monastery. However, Patricia states that there are some ruins in the woodland of Skidhill Lane and King Henry's Drive, near to Fairchild's School, and says that it may possibly be the ruins of a very old monastery. Remember, listeners, lots of monasteries built centuries ago were quite small, and not like the grandiose buildings that we see in the movies. I think we need to go and have a look over there and see what we can see. My good friend Jean, a New Addington resident and a former colleague of mine, told me to look into a ghost known as Digger Freddy. Thank you, Jean. So I looked into it, and it appears that he is in fact quite the celebrity around New Addington. David, Derek and others have all mentioned Digger Harry. I'm guessing that, as both stories take place in the woods, especially around Frylands Wood, that Harry and Freddy are one and the same. The ghost of Digger Harry is said to haunt woodland around New Addington to this very day. You may even have seen him. A few hundred years ago, a man named Harry and his wife lived in a small house in woodland just off of Courtwood Lane, now part of the Forestdale estate. Bearswood was popular among locals and acted as a route between Addington, Selsdon and Sanderstead, probably using the path known as Baker Boy Lane. One day, Harry's wife died of old age at the couple's home. Harry was obviously devastated and reportedly couldn't bear to be parted from his wife, so much so that he buried her body near their home in the woods. Of course, people began to ask questions, and eventually there was an investigation into her disappearance. Harry was arrested on suspicion of murder, and after refusing to tell the authorities the location of the body, he was put in jail. He was released soon after on account of his old age. Harry returned home, but as hard as he tried, he failed to remember where his buried wife's body was, and died while searching for her one day. In the years after his passing, locals reported seeing Harry's ghost wandering the woods with a spade over one shoulder searching for his buried wife. He was reportedly last seen wandering the woods by a group of scouts. Harry's ghost has not been seen for several years, but be aware when you are next decide to walk through Frylands or Bearswood, you may see him there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as I said before, that I'd remembered an incident of a ghost horse. This was in the year 2000. My friends and I went to a place known to us then as Shirley Hills, and is actually more commonly known as Addington Hills. A couple of miles north of New Addington, Addington Hills is a nice wooded but also quite hilly piece of land. It has a viewpoint from which you can see right over London. You can even see Wembley Stadium on a nice clear day. My friends and I used to like to scare ourselves for fun, so this one particular dark night we decided to go to the hills. We walked along the top, which is near to the road but doesn't have many trees. It was so dark we actually couldn't see anything apart from the headlights of some passing cars every now and again. It was really pitch black. We stopped in our tracks when we heard something that sounded like a horse walking past us. It sounded like it was only 20 metres away from us in the hills, not near the road. We all thought that very odd that a horse would be there in that darkness. It was that dark. Anyway, around 15 minutes later, we heard a bang, and that was immediately followed by what sounded like horses and a vehicle like a carriage or something bolting. This noise was a lot further away, and from where we were standing, it sounded like it came from the car park, with the sound moving at speed towards the viewpoint, which is atop a steep drop. Very odd indeed, we thought. So then we decided to leave and go home, or probably more likely to the pub. At the start of the episode, I said that I would tell you about some creepy things that have happened to me while I've lived in the area. My wife is from New Addington, and the first night I stayed at her house, she told me that if anything weird happens, don't worry, it is probably just a ghost. My first thought was, yeah, okay. But he wanted to show me that he was around by switching on the TV at about 2:30 a.m. Thanks for that, ghost. That's very kind of you. I moved into the same house 2 years after and was witness to the odd light going out. Very young children of the family would talk to somebody in the kitchen. That was something that happened to a lot of the children that had been in the house since the 1960s when my mother-in-law and father-in-law moved in. All those incidents were okay. Nothing really to write home about, as they say. Then came 2017. One dark night, my wife and I were watching The Conjuring on the television. Personally, I think that The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2 are the best horror films ever made. I think that the second film is the best, being set in Enfield around the late 70s, early 80s, a time that I remember quite well, even though I was quite young. The detail in that film made it feel all the more real to me. Anyway, sitting watching the first film, The Conjuring, I felt a strange sensation on the calf of my left leg. I didn't pay too much attention to it that night, but the next day at the gym I noticed that I had been scratched on the calf. 3 lines, almost identical to a capital letter F, F for Freddy, but with the 2 lines that protrude from the stalk of the letter pointing slightly downwards. I took a photograph with my phone. In fact, it looked completely identical to the rune Anzus, used by the ancient Germanic and the Viking people, and apparently it means God, or the God. I thought it was weird at the time, especially as I was very much into anything to do with the Vikings. I thought no more of it. Then only a month later in February we watched, you guessed it, The Conjuring 2, the Enfield case, at home. The film ended, and my wife, sitting to my right, turned to me to comment on what a good film it was, when she stopped mid-sentence and looked at my right shoulder. I asked what was wrong, and she said, "You are being scratched. You are being scratched." She could actually see the scratching happening. At that very same instant, I started to feel a burning sensation on my right shoulder. That sensation gradually got stronger, only a little bit though. She put on all the lights and ran into the kitchen to get some holy water to put on me. Her mother, who we live with, keeps it there as she is Catholic. My wife is not religious. I don't know what I found more weird at the time, the scratching happening, or my non-religious wife running to get the holy water. Anyway, the sensation dulled down, and I got my wife to photograph it with my phone. It was once again 3 lines, a 1-inch vertical line, and next to it what looked like a capital letter X for X-ray. Of course, I went back to the Rune website on the internet and found that the vertical line, which looked like a capital letter I for India, supposedly means ice, while the capital X symbol means gift. Very strange. Cold gift, iced gift. I don't know. Now, obviously, I have no idea what any of the above mentioned symbols really meant, but I did find that the second incident very, very weird indeed, especially as my wife could see the scratching happening. That's my stories. Now I'd really like to hear yours. Please do send them in to me at UFOs and other paranormal stuff at gmail.com. That's one word. UFOs and other paranormal stuff at gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the website www.ufosandotherparanormalstuff.podbean.com. That's www.ufosandotherparanormalstuff.podbean.com. And join the Facebook group. Just search UFOs and Other Paranormal Stuff and you will find my Facebook group. No episodes next week as I'm away on a much needed holiday with my wonderful wife. So I look forward to the next podcast in a couple of weeks' time. Ladies and gentlemen, stay safe and I will see you then. Take care.